All right. Well, I've got the recording started, so we'll go ahead and get started. So everybody, welcome to the weekly now office hours. We'll see how long we need this for every week, but we'll keep it weekly for now, just until people don't need it. I just wanted to give a quick update, kind of just informational. We do record these, as you can tell. And so in recording these, we do post these to the website as well. So I've had a couple of questions come up about these recordings and the GAIN training as well. If you go to JBBS Colorado or Google JBBS Colorado or Google Colorado JBBS, one of those, doesn't really matter. Usually it's the first site that pops up on Google. And if you go to that website and go all the way down to resources for county jails, there is a tab for the global appraisal of individual needs, GAIN resources tab. Click that, and the 2 office hours that we have had, as well as the GAIN training we have had, those are both, all 3 of those are on there. So these recordings get on there usually within a week or gosh, I can't talk. Usually within a day, not a week, usually within a day or so. As soon as this recording downloads, I reach out to our comms folks for a request to get it in there, and it's usually in there pretty quickly. So just for everybody's information, that usually gets in there pretty fast. And with that, I will go ahead and pass everything to Alex. Jill, you are not on mute. If you can push mute, please. Thank you, ma'am. All right, so with that, I will go ahead and pass everything on to Alex. So Alex, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Becky. Appreciate it. And thanks for everybody for showing up. So a couple of quick things. So we'll get into questions. I'll open it up for you all to answer or ask questions, and we'll do our best to answer those here. Before we get started, though, there were a couple of questions from last time, and we were able to get some of that information. So I wanted to provide some updates to everybody. So the issue with Civicore, right, where people were losing data, I was able to talk to them about that. And basically what was happening was, if somebody, so when you click, is client eligible for services, you got to click yes, right? And then do they decline participation? You click no, and that opens up the whole field. If for some reason, because before, if you open up a file, right, a referral from the past, before these changes were made, those questions had to be answered when you updated that old file. So if you answered one of those and you said client decline participation, yes, and then you submitted it, it deleted everything that came after that. Okay, so just make sure that you're doing it the right way, in the sense that, is client eligible for services? Yes. Do they decline participation? No. If you do that, it will not delete any of the information. And in fact, we worked with Civicore so that even if somebody screws it up going forward, it will not delete that information going forward. But the system had not been set up to do that. So for those of you that are still missing data, right, and that's an important thing, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to manually enter that information. So I was able to get from Civicore an archived version of everything that was in the database on July 29th. July 29th was before any of these changes were made. So any information that was in the system on July 29th, I have access to that information now. So if you have client files that you accidentally deleted, files like torrents, right? If you have that situation, just email me or Becky or Kelly, right? Preferably me, and we set up a one-to-one. I'm going to get the client's names from you that are missing that file, that information on file, and I will go back through from the historical data, and I will implant that new information into the current system. So we're basically just going to take the archive data that was saved before, before July 30th, right? On July 29th, we're going to take that information and I'll manually input that information into those client files, right? So that's the solution. Fortunately, we're only talking about 2 weeks worth of potential changes. So it shouldn't be like, thousands of people. It should only be a couple dozen maximum for each facility. So we're looking probably going to be 150 or so is what I'm counting on. I'm happy to do that, but we're going to have to do that manually because that data doesn't exist in the system now. It got deleted because you clicked submit at the wrong time, and it took away all that information, which sucks. But fortunately, we have the archive data, so we can take that archive data and put it in there and redo the file. So email me if you're missing data. If you made a mistake or something happened and now you're missing that historical data, email me. We'll set up a one-to-one meeting. I'll get the client names from you at that time, or I can show you my screen and you can put the stuff in, whatever works for you, but we can get you that information back into the system so that now the system will be current again. Does that make sense? Does anybody have questions about that specifically? Okay, so, and it was a process, so happy to help. The other thing, I'm going to share my screen for this. We had a couple of questions about the gain. So I put together this little how-to guide for the gain. Basically, so we had a question about we had a couple of questions about how long to complete the gain. We got all that together here. So the idea is as soon as somebody's admitted to the JBBS program, you want to administer the gain. And we understand that you can't necessarily do that, overnight in some cases. So we're asking that you do it within 15 days at the maximum, right? That's when the gain needs to be administered. Even if it's the paper gain, right? Maybe you don't put it in the electronic system, you still have to administer the gain assessment within 15 days. Now, again, preferably it's going to be within a day or two, right after they're admitted to the program. But the timing for that is within 15 days. Then if you do have those paper copies, you want to make sure you get those into the system no more than 15 days later, right? So as soon as possible after admission, you want to administer that gain assessment, and then about within 2 weeks, basically, of getting the paper assessment back, you want to enter that into the system. So that, the time to completion from beginning to end, like within 30 days, it says 29, I'll update it right now. Within 30 days of somebody being admitted to the JBBS program, you want to have the gain administered and that information in the Chestnut system. Okay, so that's just number one. Number two, we had a question about editing assessments after they're completed and submitted. Yes, you can do that, right? So all you have to do, you search for the client, you click on the assessment record tile. So basically it's going to be like, it'll show up just like the screenshot shows. It'll say conducted, gain Q3, 3.22, wave 0 conducted on this time. You click on that, click continue with interview, click begin interview and OK, and use the tracker in the bottom right corner to jump to the section in question that you want to edit. So if you've submitted it, you ran a gain assessment, or you put the information in there from a paper copy and you recognize or realize that you made a mistake or something needs to be updated, you can edit those. And this is the process for doing it. So I'll share this in the chat after we kind of get done, and we'll send it out. But I just wanted to let you know you absolutely can edit stuff that's already been submitted for the gain, and this is how you do it. And then the third question that we had was problems with page skipping. And so I talked to Chestnut about this, and it does look like it doesn't seem, let's see, it is a browser issue. The person who works for Chestnut wasn't able to replicate this, so they asked their software team, and it's likely that the browser is zoomed in. So I provided some instructions on how to unzoom your browser screen. The other option, and I talked about this last week, is you can use a different browser, right? I recommend Mozilla Firefox if you have access to that. But let's say you can't change your browser for whatever reason. There's a couple of different instructions. Here's one for Firefox and Chrome. Here's another one for just Chrome specifically. But basically, if you're having a problem where you enter a question, an answer to a question, and it jumps back up to the top of the page, that's not supposed to happen. And what's likely going on is it's a problem with your browser. It's not the Chestnut system, it's the browser kind of working with that website. So you just have to change some browser settings or use a different browser, and that'll resolve that issue. So those were the things that I didn't have answers to last time, and I wanted to make sure that I got those in front of you this time. So I will go ahead and open up the floor to current questions that you have that we haven't kind of addressed yet.
Is this just about the gains right now?
Or Civicore.
I do have a question on Civicore. I noticed that in the services, tracking has been removed from the available drop downs. So are we, and the dates are still there, but there's not a drop down that says tracking.
Did that exist?
Yeah, it did. I used to put that service in every time I would track somebody on their post tracking. I would go in and put the service drop down, and it said tracking.
Okay. So I'm looking at one. I mean, I'll show you. I'll show you what I'm looking at, right? And I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to ask Kelly about that because we were working on services earlier. Hold on one second. Let me get it set up.
No worries, thank you.
Okay. All right. So this is a services tab. So we've got services from 2019 up to 2024. So these are historical, right? And so when I open this up, I don't see, all I see is date service rendered, location of service, type of contact, duration, service provided, type of service, type of medication, and notes.
Right. So under service provided, there used to be an option to pick tracking. So if
Okay.
you were going and enter a brand new service, at the very bottom, the last one said tracking. Now it's gone.
Okay. We can add that back in.
Thank you.
Along the same lines, there used to be a determination of program eligibility. That's no longer there. That was a commonly used one for me.
Okay. I've added determination of eligibility. I don't see tracking on the list here anywhere. So we hid some of the ones that weren't used, right? So you can see, like, if it has a checkbox, well, you probably can't see. I'll just share my whole screen so you can see that
You can see that. Yeah, we can
pop-up
see
window?
that, Alex.
Okay,
Mhm.
so before this listed everything, right? And it was a pretty exhaustive list. So we hid the stuff that wasn't being used very often. So if it has a blue checkbox next to it, it's inactive. So I see outside counseling, public defender, mental health evaluation, medication management, medication evaluation, medication assistance, legal obligation assistance, housing acquisition, emergency services, division of vocational rehabilitation, and medical treatment. I don't see a tracking one in here.
I used it for years, but I guess if we're not
Alex?
using it, then I'll just track without putting a service.
I think they're under each of the referrals tabs, like they're individual for tracking. That way each referral can be tracked. So I think if you go into the referral tab, that's where those are.
For tracking, well, but
Yeah.
she's talking about the services tracking, right? There's a difference between
Yeah.
referral tracking and services tracking.
Gotcha.
Okay, so I'll have to talk to Civicore about that because it seems like that one is not there. So we'll have to add it back in. So I'm going to make a note of that and we'll add it back in for you. Okay.
Yeah, and also the determination of eligibility was the next one. So thank you for that, Torrance.
Yeah. So I added that. That should be done now, right? Let's see, service provided. So determination of program eligibility. That one is back in. So now it should be. If you log out, so Civicore is a pretty massive system. So it takes a little while for it to update on the back end. So I would have to log out, log back in maybe a couple of times. But after about 5 to 15 minutes, that'll be back there, the determination of eligibility. Because you can see here on this list, determination of program eligibility, it's no longer checked as inactive. So it will be available, okay? Great. Other questions?
I got a question.
Yeah.
The mental health evaluations on that tracking, why did you guys take that out?
So you'll have to ask Kelly. I'm just the data guy. I'm not a program expert. And so Kelly made the choices about what to hide and what to.
Well, I have a competency coordinator who documents when their evaluation is given, and now it's not there anymore.
Kelly, are you there?
Kelly may have had to sign off. She had gotten a phone call, so she may have had to drop off. Looks like she's maybe still on here, but I think she had gotten a phone call. So, Jill, we can talk with her about that, but we can see. But at the same time, we don't require competency. We don't want competency folks. And sorry, I'm off camera. I was snacking, so I apologize about that. I'm just getting around to lunch. But we don't want the competency folks tracked in Civicore necessarily. I guess Christina is working on their own tracking. If you all are still tracking your competency folks in Civicore, I get that, but we may just not be able to track some of that stuff that you were tracking in the past. But I can talk with Kelly about that.
And
Okay, that's fine.
What was the name of the one, Jill, that you wanted?
Mental health evaluations.
Okay. All right. So I've added that back in too. So again, you might have to log out and log back in a couple of times, but it should be there going forward. Carmen. Carmen, you got your hand up?
Yep, sorry.
That's okay.
I just had a quick question. Maybe this was covered in some of the other meetings that we've had, but in Civicore, when you are asking is a client eligible for services, I guess my question is what would make them ineligible for services?
Becky, do you want to cover that? I know you're just eating something, but
No. It's bad timing on my part, just getting around to lunch during this, so I do apologize. Yeah. So the question was, let me just, if I can try to reiterate it. So the question was, you know what? No, I don't remember. Can you repeat the question, please? I'm so sorry.
Sure. So in Civicore, there's a section in there that asks, is a client eligible for services? I was just wondering what would make them ineligible for services.
Yeah. So if a client requests services but does not have a mental health or substance use concern, they wouldn't be eligible for services. If they are too decompensated to participate in services, they would not be eligible for services. There are some certain those types of situations they wouldn't be eligible.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
yeah, and if you have specific questions about that, like Becky, did we also talk about if somebody has like a history of violence in the facility, that would be somebody that wouldn't be eligible for services?
Yeah, that would be up to the facility. So yes, that would definitely fit under there. So if somebody's in your facility, likely some facilities likely going to DOC, they've got a first-degree murder charge, that type of stuff, they may be ineligible for services depending on your particular facility. That may be a criteria that you don't work with those folks. That wouldn't necessarily be a JBBS criteria, but that would be a facility specific criteria. But yeah, that would then make them ineligible for that particular box. Yes.
Yeah. So the purpose of that, and I'll get to your question in just a second, Nancy. So the purpose of that is because if anybody is referred to the JBBS program, they need to be entered in Civicore, right? That's the point, right? They're referred, but there are those people that are referred and for whatever reason, they're ineligible for services. So that would be a no. You still put in referral date, booking date, and then say that they're not eligible. And then the system still tracks it as a referral, but it tracks it as somebody who was ineligible. And so on the back end, that allows us to compare the total number of referrals to the number of people that were ineligible, the number of people that declined participation, and the number of people who were admitted versus currently in versus discharged. So that's the reason that it's in there. It gives us a kind of bigger slice of the pie to understand how many people are being referred overall to JBBS, and what slice of that pie, how many of those people aren't actually eligible for those services. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Nancy, go ahead.
Nancy, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
I'm sorry. Another caller in the meeting was talking about a tracking button. I have no idea what they're talking about and how you use it, because I do the tracking. So I just go to client. I have a list of people I have to track, and then I just go to, the clients and under client referrals, and then scroll down to the bottom, and then there's all the tracking dates.
Yeah, I'm not sure what exactly that example was, but they were so there's two different places where the tracking is mentioned. One is at the bottom of a referral. So this is just a new referral. I put in yes, they're eligible. No, they declined. They did not decline participation. And then down at the bottom, you have your transition tracking status, right, for 1 month, 2 months, 6 months. What they were talking about is in the services tab. So if we go over here, we look at services, and I edit this. One of the options for this drop down box was apparently tracking, right? And so that's I'm not exactly sure what that was being used for, but that was an option in terms of service provided, was tracking as a service.
Oh, okay. Then I probably don't need it. Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, you got it. Sounds like it's not like a regularly used, it's only specific facilities for specific instances kind of thing.
Yeah, when it was used before, it was actually transition tracking.
Yeah. So that should be, that's in the client status referrals, right? That's down here at the bottom of the transition tracking session here, right?
Right, but when we first started in JBBS, they had a thing where they always wanted us to also go to the services and get credit for it and check on transition tracking. And that was way back in the beginning.
Right. Yeah. And so that's changed a little bit. They used to incentivize transition tracking, right?
Right.
We still strongly recommend it, right? In the sense that like it's better for the client to follow up after 1 month, 2 months, 6 months, 12 months. That's going to help with their recidivism, the likelihood of recidivism, that they're continuing to get connected to services or at least get some sort of support after they've been released from the jail. But that's different than receiving the jail-based behavioral health services while they're incarcerated, right? So that's why we don't technically require it. We just strongly recommend that you do that for your purposes because it's going to help the client in the long run.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I did want to ask one thing in the top when if a person for some reason isn't admitted into, so like it says they're not appropriate or they're not going to be, in it, do we need to worry about discharging them at any time? Are they automatically discharged and then we don't deal with that anymore?
Yeah, so it comes up here, right? So the only people who shouldn't be admitted are those that aren't eligible or those that decline participation, right? And then if they're eligible and they decline participation, then they should be admitted. You enter an admission date here, whatever that may be, right? And then once they're done with the program, then you say client discharged, yes, and then you enter in the service discharge date. So there shouldn't be any referrals that aren't one of four things, right? Anybody who's referred is going to be either ineligible, decline participation, admitted without a discharge date, or admitted and discharged. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. I just wanted to clarify and be sure that we do not have to discharge people that were never admitted.
Exactly. That's one of the reasons. So before, this was the confusing thing, right? Before those options, when you said, when it says, did somebody eligible or whatever, if you say no, before all of that stuff was, it was still on here and it was required to put that information in. So it became really confusing for people because it's like, how can I discharge somebody who's not eligible for services? So that's why we made it to this point where if you don't click yes for eligible, none of that information even pops up. So that way that we don't get confused with some of those other required fields that are no longer required if somebody's not eligible, right?
Right. No, that's a great catch. And that's, I appreciate you guys making that change.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is another place to put this announcement out here. So last time we checked, and I haven't checked since then, but we had about 1,700 open referrals in the system. And those all need to be closed in some way, shape, or form. They either need to be admitted, because again, when you put in an admission date, that's when they're admitted to the program. That'll move them from showing up in the system as referred to admitted. So if you have any open referrals, when you log on to your page and you have open referrals, go ahead and take a look at those and make sure that if they're not eligible, that you click the no for eligible and then submit it. If they're eligible but they declined, go ahead and denote that and submit it. Or if they've been admitted, make sure you put an admission date in, because in theory, we shouldn't have any open referrals anymore. Nobody should show up in the system as just referred, because they're only going to be one of four categories: ineligible, declined, admitted but not discharged, or admitted and discharged. So just public service announcement, because we're going to go through those again next week, and I'll probably have to start emailing people and say, hey, you've got 200 open referrals. What's going on with those open referrals? And we just have to resolve those to that point. Yeah, Torrance.
Oh,
Yeah,
you have
just-
to put your hand up, or
I was just going to say, just a reminder that when we went, at least for me, when I went in to do the tracking stuff and all the information got erased, it did revert every one of those people back to referred. So
Absolutely. So that's why I'm gonna meet with you all individually, right? Like I said, if you have that problem, email me. We'll get that information put in there, and then after that process is finished, I'm going to look at the number of open referrals, and we're going to resolve the rest of the ones that are open. So by meeting with me, it should resolve that issue. We're going to get that information back in there. That should close those files out. But before this was even an issue, we still had a bunch of open referrals in the system. So I'm more talking about those kind of open referrals.
There you go.
Hi, this is Jeff with JBBS Pueblo. Just a quick question here.
Yep.
With, back to the tracking. With every month, we have to submit to you guys some stats, and it used to just be how many clients from JBBS have been put back in the jail within that 1 month. But now you're also asking for 2 months, 6 months, and 12-month tracking if our clients have committed any new crimes. How else are we going to run a report on that if we're not doing that tracking?
Well, you should be able to see, like, if you're looking at a client's file and they have a referral within the last year, right? Then that should tell you if they've been readmitted to the jail, right? Like, one of the easy ways to tell is to look at the previous referral, right? And so if you have a referral that was less than a month ago, then that person is returned to jail since then, right? If you have a referral that's 2 months old, then that's within 2 months. If it's 6 months, you see what I'm saying? So by looking,
that's great and all, but when you have 290 to 300 current clients that are in custody and you have to pull a report, it's a lot easier if you could just pull that tracking and it will tell you if they've re-offended within that, instead of going through 200 and some odd clients and
you
going
shouldn't have to go through
checking
200 some odd clients, right? When you create a new referral when you click on a client, because they've come back to your facility, right? Then you click on create new referral, or you click on their name and it shows a previous referral. All you have to do is make a note of that. You don't have to go through all 200 files each month. You just, when somebody enters your facility and they've been referred to the JBBS program, you add a new referral. And when you're in the process of doing that, you see if there's a referral within the last year, right? And then you include that information on the monthly contract monitoring tool. So you shouldn't have to go back through 200 files every month.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's just, if you add that to your process where, okay, I know that if I'm going to add somebody on here and they're already in the system, I need to look at their referral date and see if they have a previous referral within the last year. And if so, I make a note of it and I track them on the monthly contract monitoring tool. And we need that information because part of what JBBS's mandate is to reduce recidivism. So we need to track how many people have gone through the program and are returning to jail within a year, within 6 months, within 2 months. It's I don't think we have 2 months on there. It's just 1 month, 6 months, and 12 months, right? So, but we need that information to be able to go talk to the higher ups and say, hey, we're meeting our program mandate of reducing recidivism. Here's the recidivism rate for JBBS compared to the overall recidivism for the county. So in terms of reporting, I wanted to mention this. I'm working with Civicore right now to design a report that should be useful for you to pull out. So like at the end of every month, you can run the same report and it will tell you how many people have entered the facility in the last month or entered the program in the last month. I'm working with Civicore to design one of those that's kind of a template report. And when I'm done with that, I'll share that with all the facilities. And that should, again, you can add to it, you can change it, you can do your own thing to it, but it'll be a template kind of report that you can run in your facility at the end of each month. And it will tell you how many people have entered the program in the last month, or you could set it for 6 months, or you could set it for a year. And if you see somebody has multiple referrals in the last year, right, then that would be something that you could use for that particular question. So I'm working on making that easier, but it's not easy to to build these reports in a way that can be shared and works for every jail all at the same time. But
the way you have it, you have to bring that person up specifically.
Yeah. So again, if somebody.
So what you're saying is we have to go through every 200 persons.
No. What I'm saying is when somebody is referred to your program again and you click on their name, if they're already in your system, all you have to do is look at the previous referral. And if that's within the last year or last 6 months or last 1 month, you make a note of that and add that to the monthly contract monitoring tool. You don't have to go through previous names. Just look at the people that came into your facility and referred as you're doing it. And all you have to do is look at the previous referral and make a note if that referral was in the last year, last 6 months, or in the last month. That's what we're going to have to do for the time being until we can build a report template that works for everybody.
So question, if that happens, so let's say if somebody was in our program successfully discharged and they were being tracked, and let's say at month 1 and month 2 they were good, and then let's say at month 4 they come back, how do we go in and close out the previous referral? Do we close it out since we're generating a new referral once they're back in custody?
Yeah, so discharge should be when they leave the facility. Discharge date should be when they leave the facility, right?
Yeah.
And that's when transition tracking starts, right? And so your transition tracking should be 1 month after release from the facility or discharge from the jail, basically, or 2 months or 6 months. Are you talking about how do I get rid of the previous tracking information? Because the referral should already be closed.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is I know the referrals closed because they would be a successful discharge,
Right.
which would then generate the transition tracking at month 1, month 2, month 6, and month 12.
Right.
So, but now you're saying if they do end up back in custody, that we would generate a new referral. So if they haven't finished the 12 months of the referral before they were rearrested and recidivate, what do we put in for the month? So like I said, if let's say month 1, month 2, they're in treatment and then they recidivate month 6, okay?
Right.
But that referral is still a 12-month referral. What do we put for month 12 since we're generating a new referral that would start them over again?
So what you can do is you can make a note in their client notes, right, that they were, transition tracked at this time, and then they were rearrested, and then you can go down here to the transition tracking and you can delete the 1 month, right, and the 2 month, and just go back to this, click submit, and then that transition tracking is gone.
So then pretty much the previous referral would never even be a 12-month tracking then, because we're just deleting it like it never happened, and then just
the transition tracking.
Yeah, and then
Not the
restarting
referral.
it based on the new successful discharge. Sorry, does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to clarify it.
So you're restarting the clock on their transition tracking, and in order to do that, so you don't have multiple transition tracking show up, you have to go back into the old referral and delete the old transition tracking. If you want to make note of that in their client notes, you can still retain that information, right? You just copy and paste that information from their transition tracking, put it in their client notes, but then you go down to the bottom and you delete the date and delete the reason for transition track. If you delete all that information and save it, then that transition tracking for the old referral won't show up on your list anymore.
So my question is, though, they're already discharged during that referral. So since we already started tracking, wouldn't it just go back to missing tracking, or should we put not applicable in that previous referral?
I guess I'm not really understanding what you're asking.
So when they're in jail, they're JBBS clients. When they release from jail, they're no longer getting JBBS services. So we discharge them. Correct. And a successful discharge. So then that prompts for the tracking to automatically come up for month 1, month 2, month 6, and month 12.
Right.
So generally, like with our facility, once they're out of jail, we track them for the whole 12 months regardless. So in month 1, if they're in treatment, we'll put in treatment. If month 2, they're in treatment, we'll put in treatment. So then at month 6, if they were to get rearrested, we would put new crime regress. But when they end up back in jail, in previous times, we never went back and added a new referral. We would just let it run through the full 12 months. So at 12 months, let's say at month 6,
but if they're back in your jail, that is a new referral.
Okay, so that's maybe our client.
Now it is.
Now that makes sense. So yes, from here on forward. So I'm just saying, though, if they've already been discharged on that previous referral and there's no tracking, it's not going to just go away. It's going to say missing tracking on them because that referral is still showing a successful discharge.
If they're back in jail, you don't need to track them for the previous referral.
Yeah.
Right.
I understand.
Now they're a new referral, and again, they're going to be some clients that are going to have multiple referrals, and that's okay. But we want the system to reflect that. We want to say, okay, this person has been in 4 times, and they've got 4 referrals to JBBS over the last 10 years. Right.
Okay.
Instead of it just showing 1 referral or 2 referrals, if they've been back and forth 4 times, we wanted to have 4 referrals, right?
Yes, I understand that now. My other question that I have is based on that JBBS pathways and Civicore process that we were sent out on August 1st.
Yeah.
It has the 4 potential pathways that you explained, where it's either ineligible or declines, or eligible and unsuccessful discharge, but there's actually a 5th one that shows on here. So it says refer to JBBS, eligible, accepts participation, starts treatment, completes treatment, successfully discharged, no follow-up needed. And
Yeah.
it says the example is someone who is only receiving recovery support items. So we don't have to track necessarily every single person that successfully discharges. There
Yeah, I
can be
mentioned
some
this
people.
earlier. The transition is not required. We don't require transition tracking, right?
Now I'm
Transition-
understanding. So pretty much basically now the new referral process by adding a new referral is the way you're tracking the recidivism. Just
Yeah.
clarifying. Okay,
Exactly.
that makes sense now that you're saying it that way.
That and the
So we
monthly
don't need to
contract
really-
monitoring tool, right? The monthly contract monitoring tool is asking those specific questions. How many people have returned to your facility, you know, who completed JBBS within the last year, right? Those between those two places, we're getting recidivism information from two different sources.
Okay, that makes a little bit more sense. So technically transition tracking is not required, but if they come back to jail, we must regenerate a new referral and close out this one that was still open with the 12-month tracking.
Absolutely. And if you do that, it's going to be harder, or it's going to be easier. I'm sorry, it's going to be easier to be able to make note of that in the monthly contract monitoring tool, because when you go to open up a new referral, you'll see the old referral, right, from 4 months ago. So you'll know, hey, this person returned the facility within 6 months. I gotta put that on the monthly contract monitoring tool. So by having these separate referrals, it makes it easier for you to track them, and it makes it easier for us to keep track of how many times they've been back and forth.
Makes sense now.
Yeah. Awesome. Great questions, everybody. Thank you so much. Other questions?
Somebody may have already asked this. I'm just trying to understand it. So when I go into my JVBS, the first thing that comes up into Civicore is clients with competency restoration involvement. That's what I see at the very top. And I thought I just heard somebody say that competency people are no longer part of JBBS.
Correct. Yeah.
So why are all these people listed in Civicore?
Because it was happening before, right? So up until a certain point, competency enhancement was a part of JBBS, and going forward, it's not. And so those are going to be tracked in a separate place, but that doesn't mean that the people who were previously in the system and being tracked by that aren't still in the system for that. And we don't want to lose that data, right? We want to hold on to that data. Now, if you want, we can probably rearrange it to where that's not the first thing that shows up at the top of your list. But that information, that data needs to remain in the system, so that if somebody comes to us and says, well, tell me about competency enhancement 5 years ago, right? We can pull that information from Civicore, even though moving forward, JBBS is not responsible for competency enhancement, right? In the past, it was part of what we were doing.
Okay, yeah, I just think it's a little confusing when you go into Civicore and you see all those competency restoration people.
Yeah.
And then you find out, wait a minute, that's no longer part of what we're doing.
Right. Now, and I'm unsure, right? Can you edit what you want to see at the top?
That's a good question. I do not know the answer to that.
All right. I will ask Civicore about that, and I will talk to them about that, and I will let you know at the next office hours.
Thank you.
That way, if you can edit it to put whatever you want to be at the top to be at the top.
That sounds great.
Yeah, sounds good. But again, we don't want to delete that information because we need to keep that in the system because it was part of this previously, right? So, all right, sounds good. Other questions? How's everybody doing with the gain assessments in terms of getting, stuff into the system? Does anybody have a lot of paper copies that they still have not entered into the Chestnut system yet? I guess I'll ask. I have a list. I'm able to check who's doing the gains and how many are getting entered. And I don't know, Becky, do we want to take a look at that information collectively so we can see how many, or do we want to hold off on that for another week or two?
Let's hold off on that. I think we could probably discuss that internally first and then bring that to a meeting.
Okay, sounds good. But just so you all know, right, we're looking at the back end in terms of which facilities are submitting gain assessments on Chestnut, right? And there are some facilities that are doing a really, really good job, and there are other facilities that have really low numbers right now. And so one of the kind of questions that we're asking ourselves is that because you're not administering the gain, or is that because you're doing the paper and you haven't put the paper copy in, entered the information from the paper copy into the system? So just be aware that that's a conversation that we're going to have going forward, because we want to make sure, you're administering the gain to everybody who gets admitted to the JBBS program, and any assessment has to be recorded in the Chestnut system. Nancy, go ahead.
So once you guys discuss it internally, can we get that information to us to see if we're doing okay individually?
Yeah, absolutely. That's easy for sure. We wanted to give it like a month to kind of catch
Sure.
up, right? And make
Yes.
sure everybody's kind of getting used to it, because
It's
it's
a
a new
rough start.
system. Yeah, exactly. It's a new system. So we didn't want to like harp on it too much in the beginning, but I just wanted to let everyone know we can see that on the back end, and we're kind of tracking that. And yeah, when it gets to that point, maybe in another couple of weeks at the end of August, beginning of September, yeah, we can share that information with everybody individually, and we might talk about it collectively too, right? And so that you all can see how many gains, because we're not looking at names on the gains or anything. It's just number of assessments that have been administered. So it's not too harmful to show everybody those numbers from other facilities, just so you can have some context for what other facilities are doing and where they're at.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Jennifer, go ahead.
Okay, my question, and it might have already been answered at some point, because I couldn't get on in time the last meeting, and this one I was a little late. Entering everybody in Civicore is only if they're on the JBBS program, or everyone that comes to jail?
Only if they've been referred to the program. So Becky can speak a little bit more to this, but if they come to you and they say, I want to do JBBS, right, they have to be recorded. It's not for everybody that comes in the jail. There are some jails, I will say this, where everybody is screened for JBBS, right? And so they're technically everybody who's admitted to the jail is referred to JBBS, but that's not true for the majority of jails. So Becky, do you want to talk more about the criteria for that?
Okay, just real quick, let me say, because we do offer it to every inmate, unless they are not using drugs or alcohol or anything. I mean, and if we do see any behavior problems. And so we have been screening everyone that's coming in, and they'll refuse JBBS, and I do put they refuse. So is that somebody then that I probably wouldn't have to enter?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
You shouldn't have to enter everybody. You shouldn't have to enter all of your folks. Entering everybody that's booking is doing a lot more. That's booked in is doing a lot more than you need to do. What I would say, if you do offer it to everybody, and like Alex said, some facilities do that. Sounds like you guys do that. If you do offer it to everybody, those folks that you get a bite that, yeah, maybe I'd be interested, maybe that'd be okay, I'd be willing to talk more about it. Oh, yeah, I really want to do that. Those folks are the folks that you should enter.
Okay, now if I've entered a couple of people that, refuse the JBBS.
It's okay. That's not a problem. It's not going to screw things up too much, right? What we want to do, and again, just so everybody knows, we want the program to look appealing, right? In the sense that anybody who says, hey, would you like to do JBBS? We need to be able to kind of look at the numbers of the total number of people that are offered that option versus how many of those people are ineligible, how many of those people decline, how many people accept and are admitted. That gives us more data to kind of work on. So if we see a lot of people who are offered it and they're refusing or declining participation, we can have a conversation about how to make JBBS more appealing for people, or maybe there's a better way we can pitch it to people. But that allows us to kind of make programmatic decisions, and we can only do that if we know how many people is this being seriously offered to, and how many people are seriously declining it or seriously ineligible. Because if we see a lot of people that are ineligible, then we need to have a conversation about, well, let's make sure we're targeting the people that we're sure that are eligible, right? If you know somebody's in there on first-degree murder charges, don't offer them JBBS because they're going to be ineligible. So that helps us kind of refine the program and save you time, in the sense that at least a couple of people every month are not going to be eligible. You don't have to waste your time asking them, right, if they want to do JBBS, because they're not going to be qualified. So that helps you kind of make better use of your time. Does that make sense?
We didn't hear your response, Jennifer. You went off mute briefly, but we didn't hear you.
No, I just said completely makes sense. Thank you very much. Made it more clear for me. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's not to say that, like, don't offer it to people unless you know they're going to take it. That's not what we're saying. We want to make sure that we're targeting our approach so that, again, we're not wasting your time or their time by offering a program that they're not going to be eligible for whatever reason. So like you gave the example, you give it to everybody and a lot of people say, no, I don't want to do it. If somebody like Becky was saying, if somebody's like, yeah, I'm interested, but then you go through the process and they're like, you know what, I'm not going to do it. That's more of that's something that needs to be recorded because they've said, yeah, they've been referred, they've kind of taken it seriously, and then they decided that that's not for them. That's what needs to be recorded more so than like, hey, you've been booked. Do you want to do this? Right. That's less of something that we're concerned about.
Okay, I got you. Thank you.
Cool. You got it. Of course. So we have about 10 minutes left. Other questions that we can answer? GAIN, Civicore, monthly contract monitoring tool, other data questions. All right.
I have a question for from my counselor, so I'm speaking for them. So you kind of said, oh, don't be putting first-degree murder people in JBBS. Why is that?
So that's up to the facility. Some facilities do not. That's an exclusionary criteria for them. Mainly bigger facilities because they just don't have
we have two.
Nancy, if you're doing that, that's okay. Those folks don't automatically just don't meet criteria for JBBS because it's JBBS. No, a lot of facilities don't work with those folks because they're pretty much guaranteed to go to DOC.
Correct. Yeah.
Pretty much, but not definitely guaranteed, but pretty much guaranteed to go to DOC. And so they'll get services there and they don't have the bandwidth at the jail to be able to work with those folks. Now, it doesn't mean that they won't help them out. It doesn't mean that they won't work with them on mental health needs, get them meds, that type of stuff. It's just at some larger facilities, it's an exclusionary criteria specifically for JBBS.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
So, and it's just, that's what we see in a lot of instances. I'm sorry, I misspoke, right? And a lot of this is based on the facility's policies and what they have decided, right? In terms of, here are the people that we're going to make JBBS available to. There are some facilities that have decided, look, this is a population we're not going to make it available to for whatever reason. But yeah, it's facility to facility. I will also say, right, that if somebody is not going to be eligible, but some, and they're not actually going to, you're not going to administer the GAIN assessment or anything, but let's say they do get a backpack or something like that. Like if they're touched by JBBS dollars in some way, we want them counted in the monthly contract monitoring tool because we need to know how many people are getting touched by JBBS dollars. So there are going to be a few, kind of what we'll call them outliers that don't make it into Civicore, that don't get the GAIN assessment, but they're still getting touched in some way by JBBS dollars. That at the very least has to be recorded on the monthly contract monitoring tool, because again, we need to be able to say, this is how we're spending our money. This is how many people are receiving some form of JBBS assistance. And that's our kind of that question on the monthly contract monitoring tool is our catch-all for those few. So somebody that may not qualify for the actual JBBS programming, but still receive some sort of help from us, dollars are spent on them in some way, they still get recorded somewhere. Does that make sense? And again, that's a small category, but we wanted to make sure every dollar gets kind of accounted for in the sense that how many people are we providing JBBS dollars in support of in some way, shape, or form. Because again, you're all doing a great work, right? And we want to make sure that gets recognized. We want to make sure that people, the higher ups and the people who aren't doing this stuff on the ground know how many people are getting served, right? And how many people are getting touched by JBBS dollars. So I'm actually doing evaluations of the previous set of monthly contract monitoring tools from the last fiscal year. And I can I won't get into too much detail about it, but I did want to say, it looks fantastic, right? So the total number that was served in fiscal year 2024 is 45,388 people, right? So you all collectively help serve 45,388 on a monthly basis. The average per month is 3,842 people. So almost 4,000 people per month in the state of Colorado are getting assistance from the JBBS program. Those are huge numbers. I mean, I work with other criminal justice programs, and they're doing great in their own way, but they're looking at, 300 or 400 served in a year, or 1,000 served in a year. JBBS is helping 43,000 people a year. 45,000, my bad, I misspoke. So that for whatever it's worth, like, kudos to everyone for the great work that you're doing, because those are good numbers. And that helps us go back to the people who pay the bills and say, look at what we're doing. Look at how many people are receiving assistance. And so again, moving forward, we want to refine that, make that even better. Not just how many people are receiving assistance, but here's how many people that went through these programs and they were this much less likely to return to a facility than somebody who didn't receive these services, right? Those are all kind of pieces of the pie, pieces of the puzzle that allows us to justify this program's continued existence in both in the short term and in the long term. And as you all know, funding just this year was harder to come by. We don't want to get to a point where it becomes harder and harder as the years go on. And so this data and kind of tightening the nuts and bolts on all of this helps us go back and say, see what's happening, see how many people are being helped, see how it lowers the recidivism rate. That's why we're doing it, right? Definitely don't want you to think that we're like arbitrarily like making your lives more difficult or mine, by the way. We're all in this struggle together. And I think there's some great stuff being done. You're doing great work. We're just continuing to tighten the screws so that we can demonstrate to other people the great work that we're doing and justify those dollars. So, all right. Well, does anybody have any other final questions before we call it? I know there's another meeting coming up soon. So, okay.
All right, we'll go ahead and call it. I do want to just make a quick announcement. We will not have an office hours next week. We have an in-person meeting next week on our end, and two of us will likely be driving during our normal scheduled time. So we're going to skip next week just because a couple of us are likely going to be driving back from that meeting. So we're going to meet again on August 28th. That would be Wednesday, August 28th at 2 o'clock. I've got a 1 o'clock, so we need to have it at 2 o'clock again. So sorry about the time change, but we'll see if we can keep something consistent. But so if you've got a question, please reach out to Alex or myself or Kelly. Camille is also available specifically with the gains, so please let us know what questions you have. But I'll get an invite sent out here in a little bit for 2 weeks from today at 2 p.m.
And just before we leave, I just want to remind you, if you have a problem with the missing data in Civicore, email me so we can set up a meeting and get that data put back in there. But I need to meet with you so I know who is missing data so I can put it back in there. And then I will get answers out about we'll try and fix the tracking tab on the services thing. We'll get that fixed. And Galen, I'll try and get you an answer on editing the home screen to get the comp enhancement stuff moved lower down the list. So I'll work on that. Even if we're not meeting next week, I'm going to work on that stuff in the interim. Okay.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. Yeah.
Appreciate it, guys.
Yep. Have a great rest of the day.
You too. Thank you.